So my mental health journey has been sort of lifelong. When I was a kid, I was very emotional my whole life, more emotional than all the other kids around me. Um, I used to cry in school all the time over, the silliest stuff. When my parents were getting divorced, I would have very aggressive, spurts of anger, um, crying, just really big emotions in a really, tiny kid body. Um, and then when I was in middle school, my the guidance counselor in middle school took my parents aside and said, "This this is kind of concerning, the amount of feelings that she's feeling. Um, you should probably take her to a doctor and have mental health looked at and discussed." So I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety when I was in sixth grade. Um, and the next year, my dad was actually diagnosed with cancer. It actually helped a lot being able to know that a lot of the things I was feeling so, you know, as a kid, I could only say like I was feeling really big feelings and really sort of uncontrolled feelings. I was seeing psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists. My dad was battling cancer, and my parents were divorced, and I had just moved to a new state, and having sort of a diagnosis to help me know that I wasn't just crazy was very helpful in that time.
My mental health story is basically non-existent. Um, it's kind of hard to put it in words because that the conversation of mental health was not really a thing, and I don't know if that was just like a man stigma type deal or if that was just the way I was brought up, which could probably be both in my scenario with a single dad leading the charge. Um, I don't know, like you feel emotions, you feel these things, but even to this day, I still have a lot of trouble processing emotions. I don't really feel an emotion until it's like, pretty harsh or pretty, bad. And I think a lot of that is because I was never brought up to identify those things and identify you know, oh, if you're sad, just suck it up, deal with it. If you're mad, you deal with it. And that was just a common speak that would always happen to me. And so mental health just didn't make sense to me personally until I met Marin, where like I tangibly saw like an individual who clearly is fine some days, but then other days it doesn't make sense. It's the way that the mountains and valleys kind of go, they're very inconsistent, but that's because someone dealing through mental health can't predict or can't tell you when those episodes are going to happen. And so seeing someone truly go through mental health themselves, especially someone so dear and close to me, it was hard, but like it opened up my eyes to what it truly meant.
Going through high school, I, played around with different medications and different therapists and such. I was always a very, very good student. I was this straight A student. I was a star athlete. I was kind of the girl who was in all the different cliques. I was in the athlete clique. I was in the school plays. I was in the history bowl clique. And so everyone really expected big things of me when I went to college. And I went to Florida State, and I just completely fell apart. I could not perform in college the way I thought I was going to. And my third semester at Florida State, I tried to kill myself. And on campus, the on-campus police were called, and they took me to the local hospital, and I was hospitalized for 3 days. And for me at that time, I had been a Christian for a couple years. I became a Christian when I was 16. And that was one of the darkest periods of my life, because I had built this identity of being the perfect student. And in college, especially at such a big school like Florida State, I was just a number. I went into these big lecture halls where I was one of 500 people, and my professors didn't know me. And, I was so far from all the people that I knew in the church that I had grown up in, and I had no security. And when I tried to reach out to people about my mental health, it was just other college kids who also didn't, they had no security blanket there. And so I was just drowning, and I couldn't communicate with my parents in the way that I needed to. And so when my grades started failing and when my social life started erupting, I just felt like I'm a failure. So my parents ended up coming up, and they brought me out of the hospital, and we had a really big heart-to-heart conversation. And they were like, so clearly this is not where you're supposed to be. So I ended up moving home for a couple years, and I just stayed at home. I worked at Starbucks for a couple years, and I ended up meeting Austin. And we dated long distance. We met online, and then we both moved to Alabama together. The plan was to go to Highlands College. And in a twist of fate, Austin got into Highlands College, and that was just not the plan God had for me. So I did not go to Highlands College, but I moved to Alabama to continue working at Starbucks.
Yeah, so in Alabama, when we first moved there, of course, the goal was that we were both going to be in seminary college. I got in, she did not. That was that was probably one of the biggest issues coming in, was that there was no purpose for Marin to be there while there was for me. We made the choice to both move down there. It worked out well. But Marin just felt like kind of like in an abyss, really, just kind of wandering in this unknown area with not having many friends, just going to work, and that's all she did. So the joy aspect of being in Alabama was not there. I being in seminary, I had a focus, I had a drive that kept me going for those 2 years, while Marin was at her apartment, sometimes having mental breakdowns, or there was I think 3 months where it was just constant mental health issues. And it wasn't it wasn't that I just think all the burden, all the weight that she was carrying with her, it was collapsing on her. She couldn't manage the idea of wanting to be in ministry one day, but then God not allowing her to be in seminary. That idea kind of threw her for a loop, and for her to try to find her grounding again was really, really difficult. There was a lot of times where you would see hope. There would be a little bit of the light shining through the darkness, but then the darkness, for some reason, would always win. That darkness kept showing up more and more. And of course, I was in close contact with your mom and stepdad and stuff like that. And so we were able to make it through, but it really showed me that I was praying for Marin, wanting to ask God to protect her and keep her safe and everything like that. But there was almost an aspect of that where I had to go, I had to do something. It wasn't, I could trust in God that God's going to take care of it, but I had to put some things into motion, and I had to, make sure that, in our relationship, I'm usually the cook. And so, for her, having a meal or having meals set up for like later and stuff like that, making sure that she was her foundation was kind of set for her to kind of thrive. Where for me, it was hard to balance both trying to set you up and then trying to go to seminary that requires a lot of time. And there was times where I made the choice to stay with Marin rather than pursue an opportunity in ministry, because she needed it. And I don't blame you for that at all. It's just that's what she needed to get by, and I'm glad I did it. Alabama was fun, but it was stressful.
Yeah.
Because we had to figure it out.
Just the first 2 years.
Yeah, that was first 2 years. Yeah. So that was crazy.
So, year 3 in Alabama, or third and final year in Alabama, was 2020, which for everyone
Yippee.
was a bad mental health year. In May of 2020, Austin graduated college, which was great. It was a huge celebration. The same day Austin graduated college, I took a pregnancy test and found out I was pregnant, which was not exactly the way we planned for things to go. But we now have Marcus, who is a huge blessing in our life.
Yes, he is.
My pregnancy was rough. It was very hard. And one of the hardest things about it was a lot of the antidepressants and other medications that I'm on, I could no longer be on. So that was a big worry for myself, for Austin, and for my family, was how is Marin going to handle this pregnancy without being on, her antipsychotics, basically. And not just mentally, but physically. It was a rough pregnancy. I was physically ill every single day. I was also very high risk, so that was hard. And luckily, I had a short and blessed labor. And then my mom came to stay with us for 2 weeks afterwards, which was great because anyone who has had a child knows that the first couple of weeks with a newborn is very tough because you get virtually no sleep. And anyone who knows me knows that I am very dependent on sleep, mostly for my mental health, but also just because I love sleep. Postpartum was really, really hard on me. My postpartum depression. The hardest part for me was physically feeding my son. And that so much mentally tied into my ability. And it's a stigma in the world. If I could not feed my child, was I a good mother? Was I fit to be a mother? And if I was not able to be a mother, was there any point in me continuing to live? 9 weeks in, I completely lost it. I was convinced that God he had made a mistake, and I was not the right mom for Marcus, and that he and Austin both deserved better. And so I ended up in the hospital again. And that was really tough. You had a newborn that you were dealing with at home. I had just gone back to work full time. And I, again, was in a really, really deep valley where I just was convinced that they would be better off without me, and I just couldn't do it. And God met me there again, which was incredible. But I really didn't think I could do it anymore. It was just too much.
Throughout that entire time, I very rarely seek to God. And I know that's wrong. I want to seek God in those situations, but I almost feel like I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve God to look at me in my situation to redeem, me or us, or bring us from that darkness. Again, now I know he wants to, and I need to invite him, but it's in those moments, it's just so difficult to ask for help, and that's also something I struggle with because I never ask for help ever. So it kind of shows that, I guess maybe this is my upbringing like coming out, but I just have to deal with it, and it's my responsibility to deal with it, which I know is unhealthy. But.
In the most literal sense, the interesting thing about most hospitals is that they have, like, that's one of the few things you can have in there is a Bible. So most of them have Gideon Bibles in there, like hotels. So I did a lot of Bible reading, which is nice. There are two sections of scripture that I really tend to lean on in my dark seasons. One of them is really kind of the whole book of Psalms. And there's so many good chapters in Psalms. Psalms 18 is so much crying out to the Lord in your darkest moment. And there's such good illustrations in Psalms of really being in such a deep, dark pit and saying, like, my God, you have forsaken me. And then in the immediate next chapter, it's like, but I still cry out and I still praise you. And I'm like, I've never had my clothes ripped off of me by an angry mob before, but I can still praise God. And so I love flipping through the book of Psalms and just saying, David has cried out to the Lord in his darkest moments, and he is still praising God in such beautiful language. And so I love looking to the book of Psalms for that. Another scripture that I really love is from 2 Corinthians, and it's Paul talking about these thorns that God has given him, and he has prayed, and God won't take these thorns away. And that is something that I felt for years. I pray for these thoughts to go away. I pray for this depression and this anxiety to go away, and it hasn't gone away yet. But in all of these seasons where Paul has felt these thorns, Paul has been able to preach about these different things and these different seasons and hardships that he's gone through. And at the end of it, he says, but in my weakness, God shows his strength. And so when I am weak, I am strong. And so that is something that I meditate on constantly. Like, because I have this mental illness and because I've been through these seasons, I can, share my testimony of these different seasons that I've been through, and I can reach out to different people that, I may not have been able to reach out to or, connect with before without the mental illness that I have. And because I am weak, God shows his strength, and God can show his grace over and over consistently. And he can take me out of these dark places that I wouldn't have been in otherwise. And so because I am weak, I am strong. And that is a verse that I constantly go back to in my life. So
my view on mental health is, significantly changed. From not knowing anything to, fighting it head on in some moments. I have a lot more of a deeper perspective and understanding of it, but there's still depression and anxiety, and the mix of the two is sometimes there's no playbook. There's no, this is how you deal with it. This is what you need to do, because every situation is so unique. And there are times where the smallest things, trigger Marin. And everything in my power that I can do to stop that trigger is not going to work, because a lot of it is within Marin. A lot of the that self-talk that we all have, a lot of it for you is degrading and harsh, mean, very just, you're unhappy with yourself and how you are. And I know you want to change that. I know you want to be different. And I think that's the perspective that I have flipped, because it isn't that this is just how she is, and she's gonna lay in bed all day or be lazy all day. Like, no, she wants to be active. Like, and truly understanding that she wants to be active is important because she wants to change. She doesn't want this anymore. Like, of course not. And so, knowing that she wants to push forward, I need to keep my duty and keep pushing forward with her. And that for me, I feel like if in our mental health journey here, it's if you're the arrowhead going forward, I'm the back with like the big arms just trying to catch everything that kind of as I can. And with a 2-year-old son now, there's a lot that can be thrown, and there's times where I need to, as long as I know that you're safe and you're in a bad mental spot and you're crying or whatever you need to do, I will leave you to be, so that I can go take care of Marcus.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's times where Marcus will even come in and see her crying and be like, "Mommy, okay?" And it's the sweetest thing, but it's really difficult to try to make sure that he's good and he's safe and he's okay, and also try to tend to your needs as often and as responsive as possible. But yeah, my perspective is completely it's changed and completely different now, and I empathize a lot with people who go through mental health issues, because clearly it is a hard thing to deal with. And for me personally, I've seen myself go into states of depression, but there's a difference of having depression and being depressed. Having depression is like the looming cloud over your head constantly, no matter where you go. Where being depressed it's just like it's a season, it's a moment, and that's okay. But it's understanding that there is a difference, and both need to be treated very importantly, because one I feel like can lead into the other. But it's understanding that people that deal with it, like Marin, they want to change. They see hope. They want hope. It's just partnering with them and keeping them moving forward, even though they want to run backwards. If you are in my situation and your spouse deals with mental health issues, the most important thing is to love them, care for them, just stay strong for them. They need a firm foundation to kind of rely on and put their head on. And sometimes that is you emotionally, sometimes that is you physically, that they just need to rest on your shoulder. I'm not advocating that, you stay in a emotional abusive or physically abusive relationship whatsoever. But it is important to realize what is going through someone who's dealing with severe mental health issues is that a lot of what they're saying isn't what they mean. They don't, when they're telling you to back off or, get away from me or you deserve better, that's not attacking you as a individual. That they are trying to protect like me or you from themselves. And for them, that, and especially in that moment, that's what makes sense to them, is to push people away, to seclude myself, and things will, get better.
It's a protection thing.
Yeah, it's a protection thing. And, it just realizing that the in those moments when someone is saying some could be harsh things, or, very degrading of themselves, that's their protection mechanism kind of like coming into play. And as a spouse, being aware of that happening, I think is important.
My advice for someone who's currently in a valley is do whatever you need to get through today. And then once you get through today, do whatever you need to get through the next day. And take it 3 days at a time. It may not completely change in 3 days, but it's going to get better in 3 days. You always want instant change. And so much of depression is cyclical, and so much of mental health is cyclical. And that is one of the things that makes it so hard, is knowing that if you get out of your current valley, one day you may, you're going to get out of this valley and you're going to have another mountaintop moment. And you're going to have another valley one day, but you're also going to have another mountaintop moment one day. And that's what's really important, is knowing that for every valley, there's another mountaintop coming.